Well, good evening, brethren. Happy Sabbath, and I should say a real happy Sabbath, a great Shabbat Shalom for this evening of the Day of Atonement, the annual Sabbath Day of Atonement. And we are, yes, doing a Bible study tonight because it's not only an annual Sabbath tonight, but it's also a regular weekly Sabbath when we do a Friday night Sabbath Eve Bible study. And tonight it's both the Friday night Sabbath Eve Bible study and it is the annual evening of atonement and that Bible study as well. And that's why on the screen we put the seal with a title underneath it that says Annual Atonement Evening Bible Study. So tonight's Bible study will be related to this annual Sabbath of Atonement. And as you can see from the calendar that we have on the screen from Arthur Spear's book, The Comprehensive Hebrew Calendar, and we have to put that front page on the front cover of the book on the screen for just a moment to show you that we are getting these calendars that we display here with the date both in the Hebrew, from the Hebrew calendar, and from the civil calendar, the pagan Roman Gregorian calendar. So let's just take a look at both dates. It's Friday night, the 10th day of the 7th month. So just 9 days ago, on the first day of the 7th month, we had the Feast of Trumpets, the first of the 4 fall season holy days. And tonight we are celebrating the second feast of these fall season holy days, the feast day of the Day of Atonement. And that occurs on the 10th day of the 7th month. As you can see on the calendar, we have, thanks to Mr. Joe's help here with this, we have the highlighting in purple background for the first day of the first 4 holy days, being the first of the 7th month, and then the second holy day, you see we have highlighted the 10th day of the 7th month. Now I'm talking about the calendar on the right side of your screen that reflects the Hebrew calendar. And in the same position on the left side of the screen under the civil calendar, on that Roman Gregorian calendar, you can see that the same day, that is the 10th day of the 7th month on God's holy sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar, it transposes out to be the evening of the 11th day of October 2024. Now, it's not exactly in the same position because the 10th day of the 7th month is just one day on God's calendar, a day that begins at sunset and ends roughly 24 hours later at sunset. But on that Roman calendar, from sunset to midnight, tonight is what they call Friday night. That's a pagan name of a pagan god, Fry. And then after midnight, it becomes the name of another pagan god, or the god of the planet Saturn, and they call it Saturday. And that'll after midnight tonight, it'll be the 12th day of October. But tonight, while it's Friday night, if you're watching it live, if you're watching our live stream while it's live, it's Friday night, the 11th day of October 2024. Now, if you're watching it at a different part of the world, when it's morning in the United Kingdom, because it's already after midnight in the United Kingdom now, so it's already on the civil calendar, it's already the 12th day of October. And some of you, I know, watch our evening Bible studies on Friday nights in the morning, on the Sabbath morning in the United Kingdom and in Israel. And you've told me you make that your morning service. And so, good morning to you. Happy Sabbath to you. Happy annual Sabbath to you, and for everyone that's viewing our live stream, whether you are viewing it live or viewing it from the archive from a recording. Okay, but there's the confusion we have to undergo, the confusion that God is going to get rid of after he returns and ushers in and restores God's kingdom on this earth. When Jesus Christ returns and does that, we'll no longer have two different dates on the calendar for the Sabbath. We'll just have one sweet and simple date. But again, this Friday night, it's 11th day of October, 2024. And what are we going to do tonight, brethren? We're going to be playing a video of God's end-time apostle speaking in 1978 on a subject that very, 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 very much relates to this day. And the subject of how Satan will be dethroned. And from the video, when I first aired this in 2019, or maybe not first aired it, but when I aired it, I even hesitate to say the last time. I think it is the last time that we aired this particular one, because I have several videos related with Mr. Armstrong speaking on subjects related to atonement at 1 Mint. And in this particular video we're going to play for you this evening, Mr. Armstrong will be discussing how Satan has delayed his being dethroned. And we'll talk about that both tonight and in the morning at the regular Sabbath service, when we do the annual Sabbath service for atonement in the morning from the United States. That'll, at the time we live stream it, that'll be afternoon, 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon in the United Kingdom, and 5:30 in the afternoon in Israel. And so we're going to get into that without wasting too much time, other than to remind you, one reason we may not waste much time and keep this a little bit short is that for those of you who are observing this day, you know it's a feast day, but it's a day of fasting. It's the only feast day that is a fast. And it's a fast of both food and water, too. And I know some of you gave me a call today, and you were out at a Wendy's restaurant right at Sabbath starting time in your time zone. And you had placed an order. I'm not going to tell you who this was, but they had placed an order. And when I asked them, well, are you going to be fasting this year on atonement? And they said, oh, we didn't know atonement had arrived. Yeah, it's sunset where you guys are. So their plan was to run real quickly, hang up, and go cancel the order. And that's, it's easy to do, but it is a big deal, brethren. God says if you don't keep this day, you get cut off from the body of Christ. And, it's enough, would you not say, brethren, or maybe not enough, it's already too much in one way that we are scattered, because that cuts us off from one another. In a way we used to be able to fellowship at services and see hundreds of brethren at one time and run up and say hello to, half a dozen of them, have a little conversation with several of your closer Sabbath buddy friends. We're not so easily able to do that while we're scattered, because unfortunately, as we became scattered, we also became very divided. And in one city where maybe we'd have a congregation with 300 or 400 people in that one congregation, while we are divided, we have dozens of congregations in the city now with, handful of people, maybe 30, 40 in some of the larger ones, maybe even 100. And, do any of you still have congregations in these divided vanity plate named blankety blank, banana peeling this, banana peeling blankety blank that Church of God groups? Do you still have as many as 100 at some congregations? And I know people get upset. They decide to split and leave and maybe even help somebody form another group. We just keep dividing and dividing. You see how that goes. And that's not of God. God hates that. We'll go through a scripture in the morning that covers that subject. But I want to go ahead and get into Mr. Armstrong tonight. Since we're fasting tonight, you might want to, do your prayer and get in bed a little bit earlier. We'll still have services in the morning at our regular time of 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That'll be the first service for the Day of Atonement in the morning. Same day, it's in the morning now of the Sabbath, of this annual Sabbath of Atonement. And so let's get into let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to cut into a video I played, like I said, about 5 years ago in 2019. And so we're going to cut into where I'm sitting in our old studio and introducing Mr. Armstrong. And so you'll hear me give just a short introduction, and then from the recording, and then you'll hear Mr. Armstrong speaking. And I'm looking for the place where it starts the recording. Right here. We've got it ready to go. Okay, so I'll from 2019, here is yours truly giving a little introduction to Mr. Armstrong speaking regarding Satan being dethroned on this day of at-one-ment atonement. And then he's going to be, this day pictures the whole putting away of Satan. Then Satan will be put away again after that, being loosed for a little season. He'll be put away permanently. And so, if he hadn't cemented his character as an evil, rebellious devil, he's got all this opportunity and time to repent of his having turned against God. But God's already explained through his end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong that the varmint has spiritual, it's like pouring cement. Once it sets, it's hard as a rock, and it won't change. So they've set their character to be demons and devils and the leader of them all, the devil, whose name was changed from Lucifer to Satan. He's going to be put away because of that rebellion and his ability to influence those of us who are in the flesh with that attitude he has of God is unfair, and injecting through his ability to broadcast into our minds envy of others, jealousy, lust after the flesh, and lust for things, coveting, greed of all kinds. Let's hear Mr. Armstrong now explain what happened to the being God created as Lucifer, one of the three archangels that God had revealed to us, and one of the most beautiful ones, with the pipes, the organs, the ability to make music. Today he influences music. And let's hear the details on that from God's end-time apostle speaking in 1970. Let me correct that before we go to him. He's speaking in 1978 on this one. And just give me 1 second, I'll change that label and make that correct. All right, there it is, 1978. All right, speaking from 1978, God's end-time apostle. Let's see, what button do I want to hit to bring him up here? All right, we'll start it out with this one, God's end-time apostle, Herbert W. Armstrong. No, that's the wrong button. I'm sorry. Let me find that one that gets the full screen. Let's see, will this do it? That will do it. God's end-time apostle, Herbert W. Armstrong, speaking from 1978, Satan's Rebellion.
Purpose in human beings being here, were we put here or did we just evolve from a spineless amoeba, single-celled amoeba? Where are we going? Is there purpose to life? And what is the way? And let me say here that I bring you absolutely certain hope, a hope that is absolutely sure. and that is that there is coming in this generation, in the generation in which you live, world peace, prosperity, universal prosperity, happiness, brimful and running over, and salvation to mankind.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents The World Tomorrow with Herbert W. Armstrong. W. Armstrong.
All you read in the newspapers, all you hear in newscasts is bad news. You hear of the evils of the world, and it seems that there is nothing good. What was the cause? Is there a devil? And if there is a devil, where did he come from? I'm going to answer all of those things, but to answer, let me say it's a good deal like going into a motion picture show, and you go in about 3/4 of the way along in the movie, and you don't know what went before. You didn't see what led up to what you're seeing near the end, and you can't understand it. It doesn't make sense if you don't know what went before. In order to answer the questions that I put to you that are the most important things in this world to know, I must begin at the beginning. And the beginning is not history, it's prehistory. It's before there was any history. It is before Jesus Christ. Now, I suppose that most people would say that the beginning, if you're going to begin at the beginning in the Bible, would be Genesis 1, verse 1. That's the first verse in all the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But that is not the beginning. There is a prehistory considerably, and it might be even millions or billions of years before that, because the number of years, the amount of time is not revealed at all. And the beginning then is John, the first chapter, and the first 3 verses. In the beginning was the Word. Now that word is translated into the English language. From the original Greek, it means the one who speaks and is the spokesman of the Godhead. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, the Word was one personage. That personage was with God, another personage. But that first personage of the Word was also God, and so they are both God. That is the real beginning. And that is before there was any earth. That is actually before there was any such thing as a physical universe. There was no earth, there was no sun, there were no planets, there were no galaxies. All that had come later. The second verse says, the same was in the beginning with God, that is, the spokesman, the Word. All things were made by him, and without him was nothing made that was made. In the 3rd chapter of Ephesians, there's a verse that says, God created all things by and through Jesus Christ. Now, in the 14th verse of this 1st chapter of John, you will read that the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. That Word then became Jesus Christ. Now, there is no evidence of any physical universe of any kind at the time. They were just in outer space, if you can think about that. I can understand how this God and the Word, who are alone in space, and no other living creatures of any kind in existence anywhere, and how they must have thought out what to do and planned, and they might have taken millions of years doing it. The amount of time is not revealed at all in the Bible. We don't know. But we do know this, that they created angels first. Angels are made out of spirit. They're not made out of matter. Now, angels were created before the earth. You know, Job was a man who lived long, long ago in most ancient times, and Job apparently had built a great building. And I feel that it is certain that Job was the actual designer and builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Job was a man of great ability, great knowledge, great mind. Job was so near perfect that even Satan the devil couldn't find anything wrong with him. Satan is the accuser of God's people, but Satan wanted to accuse Job and had nothing to accuse him of. And Satan argued with God that if you take away from him all he has, then you'll find he'll turn against you and he will begin to commit sin. So God allowed it. Satan took away all of his sons, his children, all of his great vast wealth. He was the wealthiest man in the East, and left just Job and his wife penniless. And still Job did not sin. Satan then came to God and says, well, he says a man will do anything to save his own life. Let me touch him and then see if he doesn't turn against you. And God says, all right, I'll let you touch him, but spare his life. I will not give you any right to take his life. So Satan thought of the most painful thing that he could inflict on Job, short of death, and that was to fill him with boils from head to foot. Then Job's three friends came, and they began a discussion. That's what the book of Job is all about. His three friends thought that all that happened to Job was Job's own fault, and he'd brought it on himself. And Job insisted on his own righteousness, and that it was not a result of any sins on his part. And in the 38th chapter, it says, then the Eternal answered Job out of a whirlwind and said, verse 4, where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Now, this doesn't make sense if Job had not built a great building, the greatest building on earth, the tallest and highest building until the Woolworth Tower was built down in Wall Street, New York, or just off of Wall Street. So Job had built some great building. Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, or who hath stretched the line upon it? Talking in the language of one that would build a great master building. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who hath laid the cornerstone thereof, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? In that case, that is long before man was created. Therefore, the sons of God, therefore, are, and all the way from the first chapter of Genesis, referred to as the angels. The angels then were in existence before the earth. They shouted for joy at the completion of the earth. Why did they shout? Because this earth was created to become their abode. Angels occupied this earth before any human man. Now, how many know that? How many ministers, how many evangelists ever tell you that? They don't begin way back there at the beginning. And if you don't get that beginning, you can't understand the present unless you know what has led up to it. Now, God created angels out of spirit, still no matter, until we come to the first chapter of Genesis, which comes next. In the beginning, God created the heavens, and it should be plural, as Moses wrote it in the Hebrew language, and the earth. In other words, God created the earth and the whole universe. But he created angels first. Now he created the physical, material universe. He created it first for the angels. He had a most important job for them to do. That is the way God created the earth. That's the way he created the entire vast universe. He did not finish it. He put angels on the earth, and their job was to finish it. God had a great job for them to do, and that's why they were put on the earth. But now, what is the most important thing that God can create? The most important thing that could be created is something God cannot create directly by fiat at all, and that is holy, righteous, perfect character. If God made the angels so that they had to do just the right perfect thing and never could do anything else, they would be like a machine that does what its maker has intended, but it has no mind, it can't think, and there's no character. That isn't what God wanted. So he created the angels with minds. He gave the angels knowledge. He showed the angels his way of living. And when he put them on the earth in order that they would work together in accomplishing his purpose, and this was the trying ground, and if they could succeed in finishing what he wanted finished on this earth, then they would go to the other planets of our solar system, like Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the others. And after they finished our solar system, which is only part of a great galaxy, then they would go to the other planets in our galaxy, and after they finished that, to the other myriad galaxies as far as outer space goes. Now I'm going to show you that instead of building up and finishing it, they destroyed the earth and tore it down and started wrecking what God had created instead of adding beauty and other things to it. Now, God is the author of beauty. God is the author of light. Satan is the author of chaos, of confusion, and of darkness. And but I want to show you a little more about Satan and his origin.
Herbert W. Armstrong will return right after this message.
God put over those angels a super archangel, the most perfect, the most powerful being that God could create. But remember, I told you the one thing God cannot instantly create without taking away the right of free choice, the right of any character whatsoever, is character, holy, righteous, perfect character. And so God did not create the angels with that. God showed them and taught them the right way, but he did not force them to go the right way. They had to make their own decision, even as you and I, and ultimately the whole world will have to, but most of the world is not called to judgment as yet. Now, in the 14th chapter of Isaiah, you begin reading about the king of Babylon, who was a type of sin on the earth, the ancient King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And then it comes to the 12th verse and speaks of someone not human at all, someone far greater, of whom the king of Babylon was only an earthly servant or type, and so on. He says here, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" That's the great antitype. Just as Nebuchadnezzar was the first ruler of an empire, the ruler over the world, so this is someone that was put as ruler over the whole earth in the time of angels. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" His name was Lucifer. The name Lucifer means shining star of the dawn, a light bringer, a bringer of light and truth. Son of the morning. Well, that's another word that even describes the meaning. Son of the morning, light bringer. He had fallen from heaven. "How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations?" Or a better translation, "How art thou, who did weaken the nations, cut down to the ground? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." Now, he had a throne. I want you to notice that. He was a king. He was over the angels. He had a throne. His throne was on the earth because it was under the clouds. He was going to ascend to heaven above the clouds. "I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. That is the only description in the Bible of the place of the throne of God in the far north. Astronomers find very little in the far north. He continued and said, I will ascend above the height of the clouds. So he was on the earth. I will be, it says here, like the Most High, but a better translation is, I will become the Most High myself. I'm going to take away the throne from God. I'm going to sit as the ruler myself. Yet thou shalt be brought down here to hell, which in the Hebrew language and it's Sheol and means the grave. Now, I'd like you to turn next to Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, and here again we find something mentioned of him. Now here it starts out talking about the prince of Tyre in the second verse. Then finally it comes to the great antitype that he represented actually. Moreover, the word of the Eternal came unto me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre. Now it started out talking about the prince of Tyre, it was the human ruler. Now it talks of the king of Tyre, who is not human. And say unto him, Thus says the Lord Eternal, Thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Never can you find a place where God says that of any human man. Perfect in beauty. The only one that it could possibly be said of would be Jesus Christ. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. So he was here on the earth, and that's where his throne was. Every precious stone was thy covering. And then it goes on to mention many of them. And continuing now in verse 14, Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. Now that takes us immediately back to the 24th and 25th chapters of Exodus, where God was revealing to Moses something about the throne of God in heaven. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now get this, listen. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created. He was not a born being like we are. He was a created being. And he was perfect in his ways from the day he was created till iniquity was found in him. Now, as I say, if God had made him perfect, so he couldn't do wrong, there would have been no character whatever. God created him with a mind of his own. God showed him the right way. God showed him the way of holy, righteous, perfect character. God set the example in that God had that himself, and this Lucifer could see it. But he had gone the wrong way. Now, he had made that choice himself. He had chosen the wrong kind of character. Now, the next verse here is, By the multitude of thy merchandise, and of course it was the king of the local prince of Tyre, that was the commercial center of the world. They have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, or remove thee is a better word, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Now this great archangel now became no longer Lucifer, the bringer of light and truth, but now the bringer of darkness and a destroyer. Instead of a builder, instead of building up and adding to the earth and making it more glorious and more beautiful, which is the way of God, he now was making it ugly and destroying and tearing it down. Thou wast lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness, and I will cast thee to the ground. Now, in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, you will find where John, in his vision, saw him and a third of the angels falling to the ground from heaven when they had tried to ascend up to heaven. Now, this great Lucifer now had led his angels into a rebellion. That left the earth in the condition that we find described back here in Genesis, the 1st chapter, and beginning with the 2nd verse. And the earth was. That word was, as otherwise the Hebrew word is translated became. Because God didn't create it this way, it came to be this way, without form and void. Now those words that Moses wrote in the Hebrew language were tohu and bohu. It means chaotic, confusion, waste and empty, and it means corruption and degeneration. It is not the way anything could be created, it is the way things become through evil. And so here the earth had come to be in that kind of a condition, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now we find that the whole earth was covered with water at that time, and it was all dark. Satan had brought darkness where God had put light. Now the first thing then that the Word did, who later became Christ, was to say, let there be light. But I don't want to get ahead of myself again. Now, I'd like to have you turn to the 104th Psalm for just a moment, and the 30th verse, where it says, thou sendest forth thy Spirit, that is, God sends forth his Spirit. They are created, and God does his creation by the Holy Spirit and through the Word of Christ. In other words, the way God creates, he creates through Christ. Christ is the Word, and he speaks, and it is done. How is it done? The Spirit of God is the power that does it. Now, it says here, thou sendest forth their Spirit, they are created, and thou renewest the face of the earth. When did God renew the face of the earth? Back in the first chapter of Genesis, you find that. Now, after the angels and all of that, we come back to Genesis 1, and we find that the earth had become chaotic and waste and empty, and darkness covered the surface of it, but it was the surface of water, all ocean, no dry land. And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. Now, I just read to you how God first sends forth his Spirit, and then Christ speaks, and it is done. And God said, now the word for God, let me go back again. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The word for God there is not the word that means just Christ alone or God the Father alone. The word is Elohim in the Hebrew language, and it is a uniplural that means God the Father and Jesus, who later became the Son by a human birth. Now, they had been put on the earth, and the earth had come to this state of darkness and chaos and confusion. That is the result of what the angels did instead of adding to it and building up. So the angels had failed in their great purpose. Now, decay is not something created. It is the way something becomes as a result of a better creation. And that's what we found there. That's what was on the earth. Now, here is what I want to show you. At that point, it left only God, the one is called God and the one called the Word at that time. This is before Jesus had been born. So it was just God and the Word. And they were the only two beings in the whole universe now that had holy, righteous character, that because they could not ever commit sin. They could be relied on never to go the wrong way. God wanted billions of people who would finish his great creation. God created man then in his own image, in his likeness, but he created man out of flesh, out of matter. God's purpose now to reproduce himself, the greatest feat that even God could ever accomplish, and that includes bringing us into righteous and holy and perfect character, required man to be made of physical matter. That's why God had created matter, because he foresaw that. It's like a fail-safe plan. Now, what is the one thing uppermost in the mind of God now? He has human beings on the earth, and the thing uppermost in the mind of God is to restore the government of God and the character of God in humans. Now, until you understand all of that background, you can't understand the truth about mankind, beginning with Adam and coming on up to Christ and from there on. And until you understand these things, you don't know why you were born. You don't know why things are like they are on this earth. You don't know what's ahead and how it's all going to come out finally with Christ coming back as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's already qualified, and he will come back to take over the reins of government of every nation on earth. Actually, Satan has been in charge and has deceived all nations. Now, how he is deceived, that has to come in another program later, which I hope to bring you very soon, and should come 1 week from now. And I will go on and show you what led man into all of the troubles that we have, how we're to be delivered out of them, how God's plan works, what salvation is, why the world is so deceived and doesn't understand the truth of God. You'll have to begin at the beginning. Today I have begun at the beginning, and I brought you up to the time when God was restoring and recreating the surface of the earth for man. Next time I will begin with the creation of man and what went on from there. So that will be it for this time. Goodbye, friends.
All right, thank you, Mr. Armstrong.
Literature offered on.
And brethren, thank you for tuning in tonight for the Eve of Atonement for 2024. And we're going to, as I promised, we're going to keep tonight's Atonement Evening Bible Study very short. Just a quick reminder of all the things Mr. Armstrong was reminding us of about how God created Satan as one of the most beautiful beings of his creation. And yet Lucifer rebelled and turned into a devil. But this day pictures how Jesus Christ, after he returns on the day that the day that we last celebrated pictures. Let me put that back on the screen. On the first day of the 7th month, just 9 days ago, we celebrated the Feast of Trumpets, picturing Christ's return to this earth. And then with just a little interim from the last holy day to today, Christ will be putting away the devil, which he's already qualified to do when he was here in the flesh. He conquered Satan in the supreme battle for world rulership. Christ has pre-qualified to oust Satan from the throne of this earth, and that's what this Day of Atonement at 1 Mint pictures, the putting away of the devil from the earth, and the entire earth and all of us as part of the body of Christ being at 1 mint under atonement, at 1 mint with God. So there's a lot more that we're going to cover on that in the morning in the Sabbath service for this annual day of at 1 mint, atonement. And you are invited to join us in the morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9:30 Central. That'll be you. A lot of you watch it later on from the archive if you're on the West Coast, because that's a 7:30 in the morning. But we're there at that early time here in the United States because of the request some from the United Kingdom made that we be on our live stream while it's still Sabbath in the United Kingdom. It'll be 3:30 in the United Kingdom for our live stream service that originates in the morning here in the United States. You are invited, as I said, to join us. Again, that time, just check your time zone in reference to the Eastern time zone. We begin at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time zone. I know we were a few minutes late signing on tonight, and we'll do our best to be on time in the morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Hope you're there to join us for the Sabbath service for this annual Day of Atonement 2024. Until then, brethren, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, your host here, wishing you a Haxamaic, happy Day of Atonement. Hope you get a good night of sleep now. look forward to being with you. We'll sing some hymns and have a very joyful Day of Atonement for the morning service from the United States, afternoon in the United Kingdom and Israel for this Atonement 2024. Until then, Hak Sameach.